Okay, so you want to really get this whole narcissism thing, right? Like really understand it. We've
Yeah.
got tons of info here to like break it all down,
Mm-hmm.
from just those weird interactions that happen every day to like everyone's got that story about their ex.
Right.
Narcissist is like a word that gets thrown around a lot, but like what's the real story here?
Well, and what's so interesting is it's not just some label, you know?
Right.
It's not like you just put it on somebody.
Yeah.
It's really more like a whole spectrum with all different like shades and stuff.
Interesting.
And I think honestly that's the key to like really understanding it.
We're not just like, trying to be like armchair psychologists and just label everybody.
Yeah.
It's more about like seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about going like beyond just like judging people,
Yeah.
at the surface level and instead thinking about where did this behavior even come from?
Yeah.
How does it show up in different ways?
Right.
And what does it mean for like you
Yeah.
as you're, going through the world?
Totally. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
So where do we even like begin with this whole spectrum idea?
Well, one of the things that like really surprises people is that there's actually a healthy form of narcissism.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Healthy narcissism. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm following.
Yeah. So think of it as like the basis for good self-esteem.
Okay.
It's the part of us that helps us, set boundaries, to
Mhm.
stand up for ourselves, to
Yeah.
feel good about what we're capable of.
Right.
We all need a certain amount of like self-regard to do well.
So it's kind of like that inner confidence that helps us just like move through the world.
Exactly.
But
It's about having a healthy sense of self-worth,
Right.
not needing everyone to tell you that you're great all the time,
Okay.
to feel good about yourself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But then like how do we tell the difference between that healthy confidence
Right.
and the kind of narcissism that becomes, a problem?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
So a confident person might celebrate, something they achieved.
Yeah.
But they don't need everyone to see it
Right.
or tell them how great they are to feel good about it.
Right.
Like their satisfaction comes from a deeper place.
Okay.
Like a sense of like, I did it, or
Mhm.
just the joy of doing it.
Yeah. So they're not necessarily driven by that like external validation.
Right. They're more focused on like their own growth.
Yeah.
And getting better. Not like getting approval from other people.
Right.
But somebody with, stronger narcissistic tendencies, they often really struggle with that.
Great.
They just stay focused on themselves.
Yeah.
And they always need other people to tell them they're good, to like, prop themselves up.
It's funny you say that. Like,
Yeah.
I definitely known people who just like
Yeah.
radiate that need to be the center of attention. It's almost like they're like feeding off the energy of everyone else.
And that can be so draining for the people around them.
Totally.
It can create like imbalanced relationships.
Yeah.
Sometimes even toxic ones, especially like romantic relationships.
That brings up a good point.
Yeah.
It's like we've all heard those stories about like the partner who's totally charming at first,
Right.
but then turns out to be a total nightmare.
Yeah.
Does that tie into like narcissism too?
It totally can.
Really?
Yeah. I think understanding like that charm
Yeah.
that some narcissists use, especially at the beginning, can be really helpful.
So they kind of like lure you in with this like irresistible charm.
Yes, and it works really well.
Yeah.
They shower you with attention.
Right, yeah.
You feel like you're so special, like you're the only person in the world.
Right.
But then as that starts to fade,
Yeah.
you start to see these other patterns.
Like what?
Like what kinds of patterns?
Yeah. Like what should people be looking out for?
One of the biggest things is like they just don't care about your feelings.
Oh, wow.
Do they like brush aside your concerns or tell you your emotions aren't a big deal?
Yeah.
Do they have trouble taking responsibility when they mess up?
Right.
Or are they always blaming someone else?
Right.
Those are like huge red flags.
It's like there's this lack of empathy
Exactly.
that they can't really tune in to like
Yeah.
what you're experiencing.
Exactly. And it's not that they're like trying to be mean.
Okay.
It often comes from this like deep-seated self-centeredness
Yeah.
where their needs and their perspective are just like all that matters.
It's got to be so hard for the other person to like feel seen and heard.
You're totally right. And if you feel like you're always walking on eggshells
Right.
or your needs are constantly being ignored, that's just not healthy.
Right.
You deserve to be treated with respect and consideration,
For sure. This is really resonating with me. But it makes me wonder like where does all of this even come from?
Right.
Is someone just like born with these strong narcissistic tendencies?
It's not as simple as like bad people are just born that way.
Okay.
It's way more nuanced.
Okay.
You know, it's usually a mix of like nature and nurture, like
Yeah.
how you're wired and what you experience.
Right.
Things that happen early on, especially related to like feeling emotionally validated,
Yeah.
can have a huge impact on like if you develop these tendencies.
So you're saying like someone's childhood could play a big role in like shaping these patterns.
Totally.
Wow.
Like imagine a kid who always gets praised for what they do,
Yeah.
but never really gets emotional support or understanding.
Yeah.
They might grow up always needing that validation from others
Okay.
to fill that gap.
It's almost like they're constantly trying to prove their worth
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they never got that like unconditional
Yeah.
love
Well,
early on.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that, like, society plays a role, too.
Really?
Yeah, we live in a culture that, like, glorifies individual success.
Right.
And cares way too much about, like, appearances.
Totally.
So it can, like, accidentally reinforce narcissistic traits.
Oh.
Like, it makes it seem like those are the things you need to get ahead.
It's like social media
Yeah.
with its like constant focus on self-promotion
Yes.
and looking perfect.
Exactly.
It's like a breeding ground for this stuff.
Totally.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like
Yeah.
this also means that narcissism isn't like one size fits all.
Exactly.
They're different, like, I don't know,
Just the
flavors of narcissism.
Yes.
Okay, I'm really curious about this now.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So, you know, we all think about the stereotypical narcissist,
Right.
like loud, attention-grabbing,
Well,
grandiose.
yeah.
But there's also a quieter kind
Oh, really?
called covert narcissism,
Okay.
and it can be even harder to recognize.
Covert narcissism.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
What makes it different?
It's like, imagine it as a less obvious kind of narcissism.
Yeah, okay.
They might seem shy
Right.
or even like put themselves down a lot, but underneath they still have those same feelings
Interesting.
that they're entitled, that they deserve admiration.
So they're not like as outwardly like, I don't know, flamboyant.
Right.
But those needs are still there.
Yeah, they might not be the life of the party or need to be the center of attention all the time.
Yeah.
But they still want that validation
Right.
and control, just in subtler ways.
Okay, so it's more like manipulative.
It can be, yeah.
That's kind of scary.
It is.
It makes you wonder how many people are like dealing with this and have no idea,
Right.
or how many relationships are affected by this. Like, quieter kind of.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to like understand the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
It's not just about the extreme cases we see on TV.
Right.
It's about recognizing these patterns in our everyday lives.
Absolutely. This has been really insightful,
Yeah.
but I have to say it's also like a lot to process.
It is.
What about people who've already like been affected by a narcissist?
Right.
Where do they even start to like heal and move on?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it.
Yeah.
So if you've been affected by a narcissist, whether it's a partner or family or even someone you work with, healing is possible.
That's good to hear.
It might be a long road, but it's worth it.
I bet it's so hard to like even admit what's been happening,
It is.
especially if you've been like gaslighted and manipulated.
Yeah, it can really mess with your head.
What would be a good like first step?
I think the most important thing is to recognize the patterns
Okay.
and to understand that their behavior is not your fault.
Right. It's like taking back your power.
Exactly. It's about realizing you deserve to be treated with respect.
That must be so hard for people to like grasp,
Yeah.
especially if they've been made to feel like they're the problem.
It's common for people to blame themselves,
Yeah.
to think they're not enough,
Right.
or that they caused the narcissist's behavior.
Wow.
But you can't control someone else.
Right.
You can only control yourself.
So much of this is about like shifting that focus inward,
Exactly.
like remembering what you deserve.
It's about going from blaming yourself to having compassion for yourself.
Okay.
And therapy can be really helpful for that.
Yeah. They're
It gives you a safe place to like work through everything, to
Yeah.
deal with all those complicated emotions,
Yeah.
and to start building your self-esteem back up.
Therapy seems like it would be so crucial for anyone who's, been with a narcissist.
It can be really powerful.
What about setting boundaries?
That's essential.
Okay.
Remember, you can't change them,
Right.
but you can control how you interact with them.
Right.
So like limiting contact,
Yeah.
making your expectations super clear, and sticking to your boundaries even when they push back.
I bet those conversations are so hard.
They can be,
Yeah.
but it's about taking care of yourself.
Right.
And sometimes the best boundary is to just leave the relationship.
Wow.
I know that's hard, maybe even heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about choosing yourself and creating a space where you can heal.
It sounds like such a, I don't know, like a tightrope walk.
It is.
Trying to protect yourself, but also maybe having to make these big decisions.
It's definitely a balance.
Yeah.
But put yourself first isn't selfish.
Right.
It's necessary.
Yeah.
You can't help anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself.
What would you say to someone listening who, like, really wants to believe that the narcissist in their life can change?
Well, change is possible,
Okay.
but it takes a lot of self-awareness,
Right.
and they have to really want to change.
Yeah.
They have to see their patterns and be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And honestly, that doesn't always happen.
So it's more about, like, accepting the situation.
Yeah.
And focusing on what you can control.
Exactly. Focus on your own healing and growth, not on fixing them.
Right. And that brings us back to that idea we were talking about before,
Mm-hmm.
that, like, we all have some narcissistic tendencies.
Right. It's part of being human.
It's about being aware of them
Yeah.
and trying to, like, find a good balance.
Exactly.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in, like, labeling other people.
Right.
But it's really about understanding these nuances
Yeah.
and having healthy relationships.
It's about compassion
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves and for others. We're
Yeah.
all in this together, you know.
Totally.
And I think understanding and empathy are how we build good connections.
Absolutely. This has been so eye-opening.
I'm glad.
I know I've learned so much.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners have too.
Me too.
We've talked about so much. Like,
What have?
understanding the whole spectrum of narcissism,
Yeah.
recognizing those red flags,
Mm-hmm.
and even, like, how society kind of pushes these behaviors sometimes.
It's been great diving into all of this with you.
It has.
It's a really complex topic.
It is.
And I think it's important to keep talking about it.
I agree. And remember, this deep dive is just the start.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Keep learning.
Keep reflecting.
Exactly. Because understanding narcissism isn't just about labeling other people.
Right.
It's about understanding ourselves
Yeah.
and the world around us.
Well said. And remember, you have the power to choose how you respond, how you set boundaries, and
Yeah.
how you build healthy relationships.
That's so important.
It is. Take care of yourself.
It's like, as we've been talking, it's really hit me how much our culture can sometimes almost reward these narcissistic traits.
Oh, totally.
It's like we're almost subconsciously kind of encouraging those behaviors.
It's true. Yeah. If you look at things like social media or how we talk about success, it's easy to see how those messages get in your head, you know, especially for people who are already kind of prone to this stuff.
Yeah, it's like we're almost like giving people prizes for it.
In a way, yeah.
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, are we so focused on spotting narcissism in other people that we're missing it in ourselves?
That is a fascinating question.
Yeah, like,
Are we so busy looking for red flags everywhere else that we forget to look in the mirror?
exactly. It's like a blind spot.
Right.
It's so easy to point fingers and label other people,
Yeah.
but, like, how often do we really do that with ourselves?
And that's where it gets really interesting because, we've said it a few times now.
Yeah.
We all have these tendencies to some extent.
Right.
It's part of what makes us human.
Right.
It's that, wanting to protect ourselves, wanting to be seen, wanting to feel important.
Right. It's like, it's about being aware of it in ourselves.
Yeah.
And trying to, keep things balanced.
Exactly.
I love that. It's not about, like, beating ourselves up or trying to, like, get rid of that part of us completely.
Well, you can't and you shouldn't.
It's more about, like, understanding it
Yeah.
and being in control of it.
It's about self-awareness
Yeah.
and growth.
Yeah.
It's about, seeing those patterns in yourself,
Yeah.
understanding where they come from,
Right.
and then making choices about how you want to act.
I love that. It's not about, like, being perfect.
No, no one is.
It's about this, like, journey
Yeah.
of self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. It's about accepting that we're not perfect,
Yeah.
that we're complex, and trying to be the best versions of ourselves.
I love that.
And it's through understanding and compassion for ourselves and other people
Yeah.
that we build those really good connections.
This has been such a great conversation.
It had.
I've learned a lot,
Me too.
and I hope everyone listening has too.
I hope so.
We've covered so much, like
We really have.
understanding that whole spectrum of narcissism,
Yeah.
Seeing those red flags in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and even like how society kind of encourages this stuff without meaning to.
It's been a pleasure talking about all this with you.
It has been.
It's a really complex topic.
It is.
And I think it's so important to keep talking about it.
Absolutely. And remember, like, this deep dive is just the beginning.
Right. It's a starting point.
Keep asking those questions.
Yeah.
Keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
And most importantly, keep reflecting.
Yeah.
Because understanding narcissism, it's not about labeling other people.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding ourselves.
Totally.
And the world around us.
Well said. And remember, you have the power to choose how you respond, how you set your boundary, and how you build healthy, happy relationships.
That's so important.
It is. Take care, everyone.
That's all for this episode of The Deep Dive.
See you next time.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.